There's an old Buddhist maxim that says if we all sat around a campfire, and I'm talking about all 8 billion of us on this planet, if we all sat around a campfire and told our deepest, darkest secrets, we would all laugh at each other out of lack of originality. Now, I say this a lot when I'm teaching and when I'm coaching and when I'm creating content. I say this a lot because it keeps making I make sure that people feel normal in their beingness, in their humanity. All right. There's none of us on this planet that have everything figured out. Now, I know a lot of really, really wealthy people and a lot of successful people. I get to work with a lot of wealthy and successful people. And I know that nobody has it all figured out. Everybody's overcoming a challenge, an obstacle. There are struggles in life. Everyone's dealing with something. Everyone's working through something. And no one gets there. All right. And I think that's important. It's an important way to start this episode. No one gets there. We're all working on something. And I think the human dilemma, the ego dilemma, let's say that, the ego dilemma is that as soon as we have this thing, as soon as we become this thing, as soon as we experience this thing, then we'll feel this sense of freedom and liberation and fulfillment for the rest of our lives. Like there's this magical destination that as soon as we cross this line, that everything will be smooth sailing for the rest of our life. And that is a 100% ego delusion. It's an illusion that the ego throws up as a smokescreen to keep us chasing more, to keep us moving forward, to keep us. It's almost like the carrot, right? Like, you know what I mean when I say there's a stick and you put, at the end of the stick, you put a string, and from the string you hang a carrot. And then, that carrot is, maybe you tape that carrot to your back, and then you start running and the carrot's always in front of you and you can never catch up to it. That's what the ego does to us. And this is what it's called to live unconsciously. When somebody says that you're living with your eyes wide open, or if you're awake, it means you see through the ego illusion, the ego delusion, that at some point in this fictitious narrative, in this future state, that at some point you will arrive and it'll all be okay. Now, this has been a recurring theme in my life, and this has been a theme this week. And it's something that I've had to, I got to actually teach and reflect on, and I got to reconnect with in various coaching calls and teaching containers, and even in my workshop a couple of weeks ago, that there is no arrival. There is none. And if that kind of deflates your ego, good. As far back as I can remember, when I was, living unconsciously, and look, when you're in your young formative years and you don't have awakened, enlightened parents, when you don't have parents on the spiritual path that have that see the world through a different lens of truth and hear a different lens of truth, or hear different sounds of truth, when you don't have those awakened people in your life, then you often live through your ego, and your ego dominates you until maybe there's enough pain for your ego to start to relinquish control and authority and power and influence in your life. But as far back as I can remember, I'll start at elementary school. As soon as I was finished elementary school, and the school that I went to, elementary school was grades 1 through 6, and 7th and 8th were middle school, but it was at a different school. All right. And grades 1 through 6, you went to elementary school, then you went to middle school, and then from there you went to high school. But it was like, man, I just remember being in 5th and 6th grades thinking, shit, I can't wait till this is over and I can just go to middle school and everything will be okay. And then I remember getting to middle school, and I remember thinking, man, as soon as I get to high school, everything will be okay. And then I remember going to high school, and it was even more brutal than I could ever imagined for me, my experience. And it was, as soon as I graduate, everything will be okay. And then I got a first job right out of high school, and I was making $5 an hour as a draftsman. And as soon as I got that job, as soon as I graduated high school and I got that job, everything would be okay. And then as soon as I got that job and that wasn't enough money, then as soon as I got the next job, everything would be okay. And then I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and man, as soon as I ship off for boot camp, everything will be okay. And then soon after that, I'm at Parris Island, South Carolina, and man, as soon as I graduate boot camp, everything will be okay. And then when I graduated boot camp, then I went into the Fleet Marine Forces, and I was a full-fledged Marine in training for combat. Then, man, when I realized that I wasn't going to be a Marine for the rest of my life, as soon as I got out of the Marine Corps, everything would be okay. And then when I got my first job out of the Marine Corps, then as soon as I was going to get transferred, me, Angie, my wife Angie, and our older daughter, we were going to get transferred to Portland, Oregon. As soon as we got to Oregon, everything was going to be okay. And then after that, as soon as I spent 13 years at that company, and as soon as I went to the next company, everything would be okay. And then after I spent a couple of years with that company and did a transformation in the plant manager seat, and I knew that we were going to move from the West Coast. And as soon as I got out of Portland, Oregon, everything would be okay. And then we got to St. Louis, and we've been here for 12 years, but I had a job, a position that I couldn't stand. And then eventually I lost that job. And as soon as I found another job, everything would be okay. And then when I found another job, and that one was miserable too, and I got fired from that. And as soon as I start making some money, everything will be okay. And this okayness, as soon as I got my first client in my business, everything would be okay. And then as soon as I got my 10th client, everything would be okay. And then as soon as I had my first mastermind, everything would be okay. And then after that, and I hope you see that everything has never just all been okay. Now, this isn't a pity party on my life. My life is okay, but my circumstances are never exactly where I would prefer them to be, all at the same time. And the ego keeps moving the needle. If I allow the ego to rule my life, to dominate my life, the ego keeps moving the needle. Maybe the ego says, hey, this sales number in our business will be great. And then as soon as you hit this, the target moves. Maybe the number of students in our mastermind, as soon as we have that, then the ego moves the goal. And as soon as we have this new number, then everything will be okay. And as soon as we have one speaking engagement a month, everything will be okay. And then when we have that, as soon as we have 2 speaking engagements, everything will be okay. And this shows up everywhere in my life. And when I wake up and open my eyes, I can see that if the ego is running the show, I live a pretty miserable life. Now, luckily, I feel like I am somewhat awake and I see through this delusion. But there's times that I still fall back into patterns of the ego taking control and the ego guiding the ship, and the ego kind of taking control of the steering wheel for a little bit until I realize, whoa, what am I doing? When I realize in a moment's instance, in maybe a bout of frustration, wow, I'm taking this whole thing way too seriously again, and I have everything I need, but I'm living through my wants, and I have oxygen, water, nutrition, exercise, rest. I've got a beautiful home that's safe, and it's more than I ever thought I'd have when I was a kid. But the ego takes over and says there's going to be a new destination. As soon as we get there, we'll be okay. And that there keeps moving. Even I fall back into these traps, and I've been on this spiritual journey for 8 years, and I still fall into the ego trap of the ego subtly slips in to control and authority, starts guiding the ship, then I feel my body racked with frustration, racked with anxiety, racked with sometimes anger, and I get to wake up again and say, "Whoa, that pesky ego slipped in and took control and took authority, and now I'm gonna loosen the grip that the ego has on my life. The soul, my soul, this soul, the soul that I am, the am that I am, is going to assume responsibility and control and authority over this life. Ego, I've got the steering wheel from here." And then when I let go of the seriosity of life and I loosen the grip and the attachment that the ego has on my life, and I start to approach life from a little more joy and a little more peace and a little more harmony, and things start to flow in my life again. Joy starts to flow, love starts to flow, peace starts to flow, because the ego is the anti-peace. It's the anti-joy. It's the anti-love. It's the desire, the deep attachment, the deep draw to higher level material circumstances at the expense of peace, joy, and love. And this is repeated over and over for 52 years, actually 43 years, that I was blind to it. And then at age 43, when I started this spiritual journey, I got to open my eyes and see the chaos and the havoc and the struggle that the ego created completely unnecessarily. That even when I had everything I could possibly need, there was still like this doubling down of action and obsession and desire and craving and longing to multiply my circumstances at the expense of my peace, my joy, and my love. I hope this is making sense. And I'm trying to use my life as an example that if we all sat around a campfire and we told our deepest, darkest secrets, we'd all laugh at each other for lack of originality. Because this is what's been showing up in my life, is that some of my students, some discovery calls that I've had, some people in workshops, they get lost from time to time in the fact that they have this vision of arriving somewhere and everything being okay. And we never, ever arrive, because there is no arrival. There's only one arrival, and there's only one destination in this human lifetime. And that's your last exhale. That's the only arrival. Now, there's a couple things, a couple spiritual things, and a couple mystical things that we can recognize to help us understand this. And one of my favorite quotes by a fellow named Eckhart Tolle, and if you've never read The Power of Now, A New Earth, Stillness Speaks is a great book of his. If you've never read these, explore some Eckhart Tolle. Because one of the most profound quotes that he says in The Power of Now is, the mind wants to want more than it wants to have. And in this context, the mind is the ego. The mind is the ego. When the mind assumes control and authority over the direction of your life, then you live as the ego, and the ego will always create this gap in your okayness. The ego will always create dissatisfaction. The ego will always create insecurity. The ego will always create inadequacy or insignificance. The ego mind creates a problem, and then it assigns material possession or a circumstance outside of you or someone else's behavior. It assigns the solution to the problem that it created inside of you to some circumstance outside of you, and says, as soon as we can get this external circumstance to look the way we want or to be the way we want, then this problem that we've created inside will go away, even though there is no problem. Now, here's a Mike Kitko quote. you have no problems. The only problem that you've ever had is you think that you have a problem. The problem that you have is that your mind created the problem, and then your mind wanted to solve the problem as well. The same thing that created the problem wants to solve the problem. You can look at this in terms of how people relate financially. When they're broke, I know real life examples of this. When they're broke, they think they need $10,000 to be okay. And then when they have $10,000 in their bank account, it needs to be $100,000. And when there's $100,000 in the bank account, it needs to be $1 million. And when there's $1 million in the bank account, it needs to be 5 million. And when there's 5 million, there needs to be 10 million. And it's a never-ending quest, because the problem is that they think there's a problem. When you have nothing, and now you have $10,000, but the same problem exists inside of you. The problem is the perception of a problem. The problem is not the number. The problem is the gap, the longing, the disconnect, the story, the belief, the insecurity, the inadequacy, the insignificance that's inside of you. And the ego creates that and says, as soon as ... we'll be okay. And when you get close to having that, it just moves the needle. The mind wants to want more than it wants to have. In this context, the mind is the ego, and the ego is the mind. You can create, and I would encourage you, you can create a vision for your life. I want you to create a vision for your life. And if you've never done so, go on www.innerwealthglobal.com. Connect with my free Choose Your Destiny course. There's 12 videos and a workbook, and there's all kind of great work in there. And I will teach you the creation process, and I will teach you how, in that course, I will teach you how to create a vision for your life. And that will be the destination, the temporary destination that you can shoot for. I encourage you to have a destination in mind that you would love to get to, a destiny that you would love to experience, because that's probably your soul calling you to some higher level circumstances that your soul came here to experience. But please understand that that experience of those higher level circumstances will not solve problems. They will just help you experience a higher level way of being and a higher level experience of this world and of this worldly plane. And if you're like all the other 8 billion people on the planet, and you create this vision and you start walking your life towards that vision, when you get about 90% of the way there, even if you wait that long, you'll recreate that vision, and that vision will get bigger. And you'll just continue to march towards that. And as you get closer to that one, then you'll just create a higher level vision, and that vision will move. And that destination will constantly move, because the mind wants to want more than it wants to have. The mind doesn't want to possess. It just wants to crave. It just longs for something new. So it keeps moving the target. It keeps moving the needle. It's okay to march towards higher level circumstances. Just be awakened that getting somewhere is not going to bring any relief that you can't have right now. Create a vision for your future, but take action and be in the now. Don't live as the future is the only place you can be okay. Be okay now, because all being okay is falling in love and surrendering to the present moment. That doesn't mean you can't take action towards a new future in the present moment. It means don't reject the present moment, and don't delay your peace and love and joy of the present moment until you get to some fictitious place that won't be okay either, because you'll move the target. You've only ever lived in one place, and you've only ever lived in one time. You've only ever been here, wherever that is, And you've only ever lived now. You've never lived in the past. You've never lived in the future. You've only ever lived now. And all time is now turning into the next now, turning into the next now. And if you've never allowed yourself to be okay now, what makes you think that you'll give yourself permission to be okay in a future now? So the goal isn't to settle for your existing circumstances. Your goal is to fully commit to surrendering to the present moment, knowing that by living in the present moment, by taking action in the present moment, by upgrading your level of choices and decisions in the present moment, you can upgrade the future. But it doesn't take rejecting or resisting the now. It takes surrendering to the now and doubling down in the now, being more powerful in the now, being joyful in the now, so that the next now is joyful as well. And the next now is joyful. Then the next now is joyful. All the way up until your last exhale. The destination is an illusion. The journey, this is cliche, but the journey is the destination. And if you ever feel that disconnect inside of you, that today is incomplete, today is you're in a state of lack, that today your circumstances aren't okay, that today and right now that you need something that you don't have, I want you to sit down. I encourage you to sit down, close your eyes, breathe deeply in your nose and out through your mouth, and ask yourself a couple simple questions. Do I have the oxygen that I need? Do I have the water that I need? Do I have the nutrition that I need? Can I attain the exercise that I need? And can I attain the proper rest that I need? Owner, oxygen, water, nutrition, exercise, and rest. And if the answer to all 5 of those is a yes, that you have access to all 5 of those, you need nothing. You need nothing. But you deserve everything. But that doesn't mean that you reject and resist the present moment. It means you be present and powerful in this moment so that the next moment has a chance to be even more fruitful and beneficial. But you can't make tomorrow more powerful and more pleasurable by rejecting and resisting now, because when you get to that moment, you'll just reject and resist that moment too. Guys, I hope this makes sense. There is no destination that's going to make you feel complete and satisfied. The journey is the destination. That is where freedom and fulfillment is. The journey, not the destination. Enjoy every breath, not just the anticipation of the breath that you're going to have after your circumstances have upgraded. Enjoy each and every breath. Be fulfilled and free now. Live freedom, free and fulfilled now. And that'll allow you to truly experience everything that life has to offer. But reject no present moment. If so, you're living as the ego. And by living as the ego, you'll only invite more pain, more chaos, and more suffering into your life. Take back control and authority from your ego and live as the soul in control. That's who you really are.